We're going to talk a little bit about The Minister's Black Veil by Nathaniel Hawthorne. This is another story that's very typical for Hawthorne in that we have a Puritan setting and we have a great undercurrent here of Calvinism, a Puritan religion sort of woven into the story as we go along. It is in fact about a minister in a small town, and this minister one day shows up for his congregation in a black veil, this piece of cloth covering his face so that we can't see his face anymore. The veil apparently hangs down to about his chin, so all of his facial features are covered up. Well, this is the sort of thing that someone might wear, particularly a woman might wear to a funeral, for example. So if you're not familiar with a veil, the veils aren't worn that much anymore. This is the kind of thing you might have seen someone wear at a funeral, particularly many years ago. It's not a cheery piece of adornment. This is something that usually is worn when people are sad and grieving, as in a funeral or the death of someone or some other solemn occasion like that. So it's a little unusual for a minister to be wearing something like this. But there's a reason for it, and that's what this story hinges on. Why is the minister wearing this black veil? And this is the question all of his congregation and all the town ask all through this story. Notice you may have some footnotes at the beginning of your story telling you that this, though a fictional story, had a little bit of a basis in reality, that there was a minister in New England at the time who shot a friend, and as an act of mourning, it was by accident that he shot him, but as an act of mourning for having accidentally shot his friend, he wore a veil over his face for the rest of his life. Now, that's not exactly the focus of our story, but apparently Hawthorne read about this, and this gave him the inspiration for the story that we have. But don't get the idea from that our minister in The Minister's Black Veil is wearing it necessarily for something that he personally has done, like that inspiration. That was just the story that in true life that happened that gave Hawthorne the inspiration for writing this particular story. In the sermon that the minister delivers, after first showing up to his congregation with his veil on for the very first time, he makes reference to secret sin. We're going to see this as a common theme that comes up in a number of Hawthorne stories, very much so in something like The Scarlet Letter, where only our feminine character in the story knows who the adulterer was, who was her partner, and why she's pregnant. And of course it turns out to be the minister, Dimmesdale, but no one knows that except the two of them, and she won't reveal it. So the minister has to carry this secret of his own sin with him throughout the whole novel of The Scarlet Letter, and this eats away at him for the whole novel. And it's this secret burden that he carries. And Hawthorne also always uses this sort of thing, or often uses it, in a story like this to show us that many of us, in fact all of us, Hawthorne would say, harbor some sort of secret sin within us. In a way, it's sort of like the idea of wearing a mask. We don't let everybody see all our innermost thoughts and feelings. When we pass someone on the street, on the sidewalk, in the hallway, we say, "How are you?" Typically everybody just says, "Oh, I'm fine," and we pass on. No one really sees the inner us, or very few people do. And this is the idea here, that we wear a mask. And Hawthorne's using this veil then as a sort of mask to hide that which we hide within us. And this is the overriding idea that we get within something like The Minister's Black Veil. The actions of the minister are curious here, but Hawthorne has a basis for it in the Old Testament, as we see many prophets of the Old Testament who do things that sound or seem unusual at the time, and the people around them don't understand what in the world is going on by what they're saying or by what they're doing, but they're doing it at God's command or because they've made a vow with God, and it has some sort of symbolic meaning. Now the people don't understand it, but that doesn't keep it from having a symbolic meaning. And this is largely what we see going on in The Minister's Black Veil here, that the minister is doing something that has a great symbolic significance, but the people don't really understand this. And even at the end of the story, when he reveals it to the few people around as he's dying, it's not even clear if they fully understand at that point. But certainly his congregation does not, as he wears this for many, many years through the course of the story. He makes reference to the veil being snatched from everyone's faces at death. And this gives us a clue as to what's happening here, that as long as we are alive, we hide some secrets within us. There are some things that all of us have that we'd rather not be published to the world. And we keep those things secret then. And that's the idea of hiding behind the veil, hiding behind the mask. We don't let everyone see into our innermost thoughts and feelings and the things that we've done that we really don't want to advertise to everyone. He has a woman in the story named Elizabeth who is going to be his wife. They are not married at the point we see them in the story. And don't misunderstand that. She's pledged to be his wife. We might say they're engaged in effect, although they don't use that term here, but they are not married. And this is important because as they're asking the minister why he's wearing the veil, Elizabeth asks him, and Elizabeth says to him finally, if you would just raise the veil one time and let me look on your face one time, then I can live with it. In effect, she's saying I could go ahead and marry you. But he says, no, I can't do that. And she says then, farewell. Now, she calls off their engagement, their upcoming marriage. And she can't do it because he will not raise the veil at least one time and let her look at him. Well, why not? He has made a vow to God. He says he's made a vow. And in effect, what he's done is he's promised God that he will be a living symbol, and that he's pledged then to wear this veil over his face all the day, all the night, in front of everybody. And no one's going to look behind his veil for the rest of his life. So it's a very long-term commitment on his part here, a vow to God that he feels absolutely bound to uphold at all costs. And so he can't even raise the veil for a moment to let Elizabeth look him in the face so that she will stay with him. And of course he tells her, I'm going to be lonely. I'll be by myself behind this veil. Don't leave me. But she's not willing to accept him on those terms. And so they live apart for the rest of their lives. Well, the story goes on and on through this, and you can read the detail here, how he becomes a very effective minister, in effect, because of this veil. That it seems to impart a sort of mysterious quality to him. And people get all sorts of mysterious feelings over hearing him speak because he has this aura about him now that's a little different from everybody else. It's mysterious. It's a little bit spooky to some folks, but it makes him, in effect, a very effective preacher, apparently, through his life. He has a long life, and at the end of the story, pay particular attention to the next to the last paragraph, because all through his life here, apparently people have never been willing to really approach him directly and ask him, why are you wearing this veil? And he's never taken the initiative to explain it. And he's wearing it as a symbol with this vow he's made to God, but he's not explained it to anybody through all these years. So in the next to the last paragraph, as he's about to die, he begins to explain this finally to the people around him. I'd like to read that to you so we can talk about it just a little bit. Remember that just before this next to the last paragraph, the visiting minister who's come to see him because he knows he's about to die offered to remove the veil, because this visiting minister has assumed, wrongly, but has assumed that he's been wearing this veil as some personal sin that he's committed at some earlier point in his life, and this has made him wear the veil for all these years. But of course, if the young minister from out of town were to do this, that would make him break his vow. So he's very adamant when the minister reaches down to try and remove his veil. He said, no, I can't do that. I mean, all these years he's worn it. Why would he break his vow on his deathbed like this? So he's horrified at the idea and grabs onto his veil and absolutely will not let go of it. So in the next to the last paragraph here, he finally explains why he's worn this veil all through his life. Why do you tremble at me alone, cried he, turning his veiled face round the circle of pale spectators. Tremble also at each other. Have men avoided me, and women shown no pity, and children screamed and fled only for my black veil? But the mystery which it obscurely typifies has made this piece of crape so awful. When the friend shows his inmost heart to his friend, the lover to his best beloved, when man does not vainly shrink from the eye of his Creator, loathsomely treasuring up the secret of his sin, then deem me a monster for the symbol beneath which I have lived and die. I look around me, and lo, on every visage a black veil. So what he's saying, in effect, is when I look around, I see everyone's wearing a black veil. We all hide behind a mask of some sort, as if we could hide from God and hide our sins and our innermost thoughts and feelings from God. And of course we can't. And that's what he's trying to point out here, that we should not hide behind this veil, but yet we all do. And his life then has been a living symbol of how we are, in effect, as humans. That we don't let everything be out there transparent for everyone to see. We tend to hide it within ourselves as if we could even hide it from the Creator. And this is what he dies with then. He fulfills his vow and has lived his life as a living symbol to the people around him, even though they don't fully understand why he's doing what he's doing.